Hi, good afternoon. It is actually very intimidating to go after Mr. Tower, so I hope I can do my best. I'm actually really happy that you mentioned Singularity. I have been very privileged to spend last summer 3 months at the NASA Ames research with Singularity University, learned all about, immersed myself all about this field of exponential technologies. But I'm not going to talk about futures today. I am going to talk about what's happening now and how we can confront the situation that is happening between the struggle that we're having within humanity versus technology. So the title of my talk is called Metamorphosis, and I will reveal why I have named this particular talk this way towards the end. So I'm going to share with you something I've learned recently. So this is a graph that was drawn in 1999 by Stuart Brandt in his book called The Clock of the Long Now. Now, in this particular graph, what he's trying to illustrate is that this is a particular drawing called the pace layering, which is trying to illustrate how we have different paces of progress. So on the top, you have fashion, not beyond clothes, but things that are fashionable in the time. Then you have commerce, so businesses. Then you have infrastructures, our roads, our bridges. You have governance, you have culture, and nature. And obviously, nature is in the bottom of this pace layering because evolution is slow. Now, he also further discussed that within this pace layering, the bottom layers allow for stability, while the top layers that are moving much faster allows for innovation. But they all moved in synchronization with each other for progress of humanity. And I would even extend progress in planetary scale. Now, I want to also share with you this concept that I've been working on, which is this concept of the social train. Now, this concept of the social train goes something like this. You put your kids to school, and the kids have to get good grades so that they can get into good universities, so that they can get good grades, so they can get into good companies, get a job, get paid, buy the house, buy the car, have the 2.4 kids, or 1.7, I'm actually not sure what the number is today, and live happily ever after. So how many of us have been on this train? I have. So most of us have been on this train. How many of us are still putting our children on this train? Most of us are still putting our kids on this train. So the problem is that this train actually no longer works. And the reason I'm saying that is because we're actually teaching kids skills that are obsolete. Then they get to work in a company where they're probably going to hate their job. And then they make the money to buy things that they don't necessarily need, and most likely get married to the person that they will get divorced. I'm painting a very negative picture here, but just bear with me. So this train is somewhat broken, and on the process within this train, we are actually destroying our planet, being extremely unsustainable. So what is happening is that this train is creating this culture of fast food, of fast fashion, of fast cars even, and we're living in an age of convenience instead of sustainability. And it's cutting ourselves apart from the source of things. We don't know where things are made. We don't know where our food is being produced. We don't know where our clothes is being made. We don't know who made them and what materials and where. Why does this matter? Because towards the end of this train is that we are destroying the resources that we have in the earth. Now, why am I telling you guys all this? This is all about, humanity. I'm supposed to talk about the future and the brightness of the future, and I will get to it, so bear with me. This is what's changed since 1999 when Stuart Brandt wrote the book of The Long Now. These pace layers that he had described have been shifted, and I call them seismic shifts. Because all of a sudden, what we see is, and I replace fashion with technologies, what we're seeing is that technology is moving very, very fast. Companies are innovating with these technologies and going just as fast. Culture and nature being bumped up as we're seeing that climate change has been shifting right in front of our own eyes. And not only that, in our sciences and innovation in sciences, we can now go into and genetically modify, designer babies in the near future. So we have the capacity to change nature much more than ever before. Whereas infrastructure and governance has been bumped down, and there's a paralysis on, are the roads going to be prepared for self-driving cars in the future? Is governance and policies and regulations going to be able to keep up with these types of changes? So I'm actually really happy to be invited here, and I think Latvia is one of the few governments in the world that is really invested in being able to interconnect with all these changes that is happening today. What is worrying for me is that because we have these seismic changes, the top part, we have this fear of losing control. You know, Facebook just have this interview with the Congress in the US, and the government have no idea what questions to ask. We are feared that the nature and culture is being threatened. At the same time, all these infrastructure and what was giving us stability is having a paralysis. So, but there is something good happening. There is a shift in power. For example, in information, we know that is instantaneous and ubiquitous, right? So I Googled how to build a fusion reactor. I don't even know what a fusion reactor is, but it doesn't matter. Apparently, you can use your kitchen supplies and build a fusion reactor at your own home. I should put a liability in the bottom, a disclaimer in the bottom that says, do not try this at home, but do try this at home. Technology is low cost. Here I give a few examples. On the top, you have the bento box, the bento lab box, which is a at-home DNA sequencer that you can get for $500. 3D printers are cheap. We know that Arduinos, which is these microcontrollers that you can get for $50 or even less, and you can start creating your own robotic devices at home. We also know that we're drastically shifting from a mass production world to a hyper-customization. And so this particular dress, which is one of my favorite, is from a company called Nervous System. So you can 3D print a dress that is fully personalized on your body measurements. We also know that currently we have access to funding, right? So we know that back 100 years ago, how do you fund your company? You don't. You go to a bank and you hope to God that they will give you a loan so that you can start your company or that you get money from inherited. But nowadays, there are platforms like crowdfunding that can allow you, if you have a good idea, to launch your ideas. And the last part is that we have the power to communicate, to do the storytelling, to push our ideas forward to the world to be heard. So all of this comes down to a massive shift that is happening today. And this shift is that all of a sudden we have access to knowledge that we have never had before. Easy access to funding through platforms like crowdfunding. Technology is low cost. Communication is do-it-yourself. If you put this all together, and this is a big statement that I'm making, for the first time in human history, individuals, people, community have the same innovation power as large companies and even nation states. Which means that we have all up our innovation power. People are innovating on how companies used to innovate. Companies are innovating how government used to innovate. And we have up all our possibilities and capabilities to innovate like never before. And this is one of the reasons why we see these fast changes and technological advancement that we have never experienced. So not too far from the future, basically now, what we're seeing is that we're seeing these current changes. So on one hand, instead of seeing passive education, we see do-it-yourself. You see learn by doing. You see actively creating children, actively creating their learning processes. And instead of seeing passive consumers, we're going to start seeing a shift of active makers. And I love, love, love this example. So on the left, on my left, this is Etienne. Quinn Etienne. I met him a couple years ago, and he was 12 when I met him. So Etienne loved building robots. And not only did he like making robots, he created these kits in the red box that you see here to sell it to other children to make them so that they can make their own robots. And he didn't stop there neither. He created a website so that he could sell it to other children, these robots that he had designed. He is currently a professor at MIT teaching Arduinos to adults. I'm not comparing myself to him, but very, very capable young men we have here. We also see a shift. So on starting from the very beginning, we imagine that in the artisanal period, the way we operate and manufacture is that we design locally, and we manufacture locally, and we provide the consumers locally. globalization happen in the middle, where we would design locally and we would send it out to developing countries where manufacturing is low cost, and then we distribute it globally to sell the things. Well, nowadays, there's a new paradigm, which is that we have the capacity to design globally, but manufacture it locally, which allows for a more localized approach to manufacturing, and where we can avoid things like not knowing where things are made, whom they are made, how they're made, with what they are made, to foster a more local community-based, a local knowledge-driven and local material-driven economy. Also, there's a shift in terms of how we develop our skills and roles. So before, imagine we have this person that is the white-collar guy who designs stuff behind the computer. And then you have the blue-collar guy that is making those things that the white-collar guy have designed. Then you have the consumer that is buying these things from the guy who's blue-collar. Well, nowadays, there's this new figure, the same person who has the capacity to design and then convert that design into actual objects, and to design it for him or herself, has an immense capacity to innovate, because the rotation of innovation, the rate of innovation has been contained within oneself, so that they don't have to send it to China. They don't have to send it, I can say that because I'm Chinese. They don't have to send it abroad to have it manufactured. They can all contain that innovation cycle in and of itself. So what we're seeing right now is that there is a really high rate of innovation. This is one example of a bionic hand. So the father of this child obviously couldn't afford buying prosthetics for this child every single year, which is about $30,000 every year. So what he did was he did an open source bionic hand for his child so that it can be modified every single year for under $300. And he allowed for this open source to be used for any children that would want to apply this technology on their own. So all of a sudden, nowadays, we see a whole lot of ideas, innovative projects coming out, and I'm going to share with a couple of my favorites. So on the top, you have an object recognition tool being used underwater to recognize fish species to monitor sea health, ocean health. You have on the top left, on my top left, you have a project by Antiloop. This is probably one of my favorite projects. So a couple years ago, the Spanish government decided to ban protests on the street. And this company, Antiloop, decided to fight against that, and what they did is they created a hologram, what the project is called Hologram for Freedom, where they projected a holographic protest in front of the City Hall of Madrid. And it was completely legal because there was no one else, there was no person there to arrest in place. On the bottom left is a 3D printed food project. Very interesting project as well, where you start 3D printing a shell, and within this 3D printing structure, you have the seeds and you have the mushrooms, you have everything contained. It takes a week for all the mushrooms to sprout, and then you put the whole entire thing in the oven and then you eat it. And so the whole entire kind of growth and 3D printed processes is contained. The last one is also very interesting. So I don't know if you guys know, collagen is a product being used inside of gummy bears. And collagen is an animal product sourced from animal bones. And this company called Gelson, what they do is they cultured DNA, cultured from DNA collagens from not from the animal source, but from the source, which is from the DNA. What is interesting is that, and probably is a marketing projection, is that they, instead of using DNA of animals that we know now, they use DNA of extinct animals. So what you're seeing here is gummy bears made from a mammoth that has been extinct. So now you can eat mammoth gummy bears online. So this is Aimee Mullen. I always tell her story because she has been very inspirational to me. She was born without legs. She's an athlete in the Paralympics. She gave a TED Talk a couple years ago that stuck in my head. And what she said was that she was on stage and she was telling to her girlfriends about how when she goes out running, she put on these legs because allow her to jump faster and run faster and jump further. But then when she goes out at night, what she does is she put on these legs, and it makes her taller, skinnier, and prettier, and sexier. And her friends said, well, that's not fair. I can't change my legs. And I realized, and it stuck in my head. And it stuck me in my head for one reason. It's because I realized that nowadays, not only do we have the technologies to solve the problems that we have now, we have the technologies to go way beyond. Now, I'm not condoning to like chop off your legs so that now you can have interchangeable legs. I'm saying that, what I'm saying is that we can confront not only the problems that we have today, but go way beyond in becoming, you know, grow the super humanity collective that we have the capacity to. So because of that, I really do think that we are superhumans. We all have superpowers of some sort. We just haven't discovered what the superpower is. Now, on that note, I wanted to give you guys and ingrain this kind of philosophy and mentality that everyone can create. We are giving all of these resources and capacities and knowledge, and we have never lived in a time where we have so much given to us, so much innovation power given to us, both as individuals, as community. And we really believe that disruptive ideas come from empowered individuals. And by empowering, you know, through education, through the government, support, through as a collective sense, we can really make the change that we need to make for tomorrow. What is stopping us is this. Try this next time when you see an ant around. Draw a circle. We draw these circles around ourselves all the time thinking that there are boundaries. We don't know about AI. We don't know about blockchain. This is too far of a technology for us to understand. We make excuses so that we don't confront these problems that we have. In fact, these lines are non-existent. So, going back into the social train, I wanted to make a note that the social train that we have set up, that we as humanity have set up, is currently fueled by economics, by money, by metrics, by quotas. And the future, I think, is that, and I'm going to explain this quote by Paul Hawkins, who have written this amazing book called The Drawdown about climate change. The worship of currency is perhaps the greatest cause of social and environmental damage in the modern world. The proper study of economics is fulfillment, not consumption. Now, we talked a lot about AI taking us over and the robots and automations and so on and so forth. That will happen. That will happen given one circumstances if we continue to allow our train to be fueled by economics. As soon as we change that perception of passion-driven, purpose-driven businesses, then we no longer have to worry about AI or automation, because there's no amount of AI that could replace your personal passion and purpose in what you do. I named the talk Metamorphosis for one reason. Metamorphosis for me is as beautiful as a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And, butterfly, not butterflower, butterfly. And metamorphosis is our time in this transition of moving forward. So it could be as beautiful as this. It could be as ugly as, you know, this metamorphosis as described by Kafka, the turmoil, the fear, the unknown of the future. It is also infused by technology. So metamorphosis in the sense that, so this is a cockroach being hacked with sensors in the back, and you can, so that you can kind of sort of like a remote control car and navigate the cockroach to move left and right. Don't worry, they don't have any sensors whatsoever. It doesn't hurt the cockroach. But in a sense, what I'm trying to illustrate is that the technology is in our side to decide whether we want it to be good or bad. And I wanted to also say that good entrepreneurs make money, great entrepreneurs make leaders, but true entrepreneurs are the ones that make impact. And I think that the future of businesses and entrepreneurs and startups can't just negate the fact that they have a responsibility and a greater sense of humanity. And I also wanted to say that our greatest fear should not be a failure itself, but at succeeding at something that doesn't really matter. Because when that happens, that means that we have completely wasted our time, our effort, our resources in doing something that is truly meaningful.